Good afternoon, Patriots. This is the American Vision, broadcast on the TLBTV network and brought to you by the Liberty Beacon Project. I'm your host, Bill Muckler, and today we have a special guest, Brian Robertson, and I would like to spend just a little bit of time introducing Brian. Brian and I have known each other for a long time, and we actually co-hosted a radio show before for a long time. And I've seen Brian on his videos, and he's watched my videos, but this is the first time we're actually doing a face-to-face video. And I'm coming to you from Cocoa, Florida, which is on America's and Florida's beautiful Space Coast. And Brian is on the road someplace, I believe in Houston, Texas. So we finally got all this together. Where?
I'm not in Houston anymore. I was in Galveston yesterday. I'm in Arkansas today.
He's in Arkansas. Well, that's kind of the headquarters for TLBTV. So we're in good shape there. So let me tell you a little bit about Brian and how we got together. I guess I was doing a radio show with another guy, and Brian was calling in, and the other person, Ernest Lee, he had to leave the station for personal reasons. And so Brian came on as my host, and we talked a lot. And what I got to learn about this is, and this is true of all my shows, I'm either on with Marines who outrank me, and everybody I'm on with is really a lot more knowledgeable and a lot more intelligent than I am. And today, I'm telling you, I've got the real deal on here with Brian. He is one of the most intelligent and knowledgeable guys I've ever met and talked with, and it's just a pleasure to be with him. And today, though, we're going to get into some things that none of us really know too much about, and I'm just barely able to carry a conversation on with. So, Brian, welcome to the show. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved in. You told me about how you and your father have talked about the law and how you're so interested in the legal matters.
Well, I got forced into studying law because I have a present ongoing court case where the court don't have jurisdiction. And I've been studying law ever since it started. And it did not take me long in studying law to start realizing things are not quite what we were taught growing up.
Yeah, and that's true. And so today, what I wanted to do is talk to you a little bit about an article you wrote, and we'll make reference to this, and you'll be able to find it in the article that we've written for this show. But I would like for you to define citizenship for us, because I don't think people really understand this too much. And Brian also always reminds me that whenever I say America's a democracy, and I know it's a republic, but people don't know that, and I guess I'm talking more of not the form of government, but the type or ideology or whatever. But anyway, Brian is really good at explaining to me just what it means to be a citizen and how, I'm not really sure if we are citizens of the federal government. I think we're citizens of the state, as I understand it, the states we're
in. It depends. You can be a citizen of both, okay? But that requires a history lesson. Now, the article is titled, "Who Are You? American Slavery Defined." See, everybody presumes that slavery was abolished. Well, if you go read the 13th Amendment, it didn't abolish slavery, it legalized slavery. Now, it's not a word-for-word quote, but it says slavery and involuntary servitude shall not be allowed in these United States and territories, comma, except for the punishment of a crime, comma. Now, I stress those two commas. where you're duly convicted by a jury of your peers. Okay? That goes between those commas is a clause. Okay, so that tells you if you go to jail or you go to prison, you're a slave. Now, when the courts look at a law like the 13th Amendment, and statutes, codes, rules, and regulations are not law. Now, people are going to say I'm crazy, but they're not law. You've been taught to believe they are law. When the courts look at something like the 13th Amendment, they pay attention to what is said and what's not said. What's not said is voluntary slavery is legal. Okay. Now let's define the word slavery according to the law. Okay. I'm going to read directly from Black's Law Dictionary, 10th edition. It says, a situation in which one person has absolute power over the life, fortune, and liberty of another. That's the first definition. Second definition, the practice of keeping individuals in such a state of bondage or servitude. It's in the expert commentary right underneath. Now, the expert commentary is made by lawyers, right? It says slavery was a big problem for the Constitution makers. Those who profited by it insisted on protecting it. Those who loathed it dreaded even more the prospect that to insist on abolition would mean that the Constitution would die a mourning. So the framers reached a compromise of sorts. The words slave and slavery would never be mentioned, but the Constitution would safeguard the peculiar institution from the abolitionists. This is by Jethro K. Lieberman, The Evolving Constitution, page 493, 1992. That is only 16 years ago that they're saying this. I start off the article talking about you got to set your beliefs aside and realize how the people in power believe.
That's a good point, because let me interject something here. I should have started out the show with, and I mentioned this on many of my shows before, is as a people in America, we suffer from paradigm paralysis. We are so much into ourselves that we believe everything we know is to be true, and we can't look outside of that paradigm. We can't bust that paradigm. It's so difficult for us. But today, I think Brian's going to bust some of our paradigms, and rightfully so. They need to be broken. They need to be destroyed, because we've got to learn how to think a different way in America than we have been before. Otherwise, we're doomed.
Well, you know, I am a Christian, and the Bible talks about slavery. A lot of people throw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, you hear people always say it, I don't talk about religion or politics, but they don't ever think about why they were taught that. They were taught to not talk about that because, one, all our laws are based on biblical principles. There's been studies put out where most all Constitution and the Declaration of Independence was all founded upon the book of Deuteronomy. Most of it comes out of there, okay? So if you're not going to at least learn the Bible, whether you believe the God that I serve or that you are a Christian, the principles in the Bible are sound, like slavery. Slavery is completely permissible under certain circumstances. Look at the 13th Amendment. If you did somebody harm, or if you injured or harmed person or property, and it's in that order, then you owe a debt. And if you owe a debt, then you are a slave to the person you owe the debt to.
So, and then that leads us to I believe it was 1868 was the 14th Amendment, which you and I have talked about before. And according to the 14th Amendment, that was about people who were slaves, farmer slaves, but there's none of them living anymore. So would you talk about that a little bit, Brian?
Now, in 1868, you know, what was the original intent? Now, we're not going to get in right now to whether the 14th Amendment was actually legally ratified, because there is a lot of question as to whether it's even not legally supposed to be there. That's as far as recent history of 1967 in Congress, where a congressman introduced all the evidence to prove that it was not legally ratified. But we'll talk about that at another time. What was the original intent of the 14th Amendment? The original intent was to bring the former slaves into the federal citizenship, supposedly to protect them. Now, I'll explain a legal principle. This is in natural law. See, natural law is actually the highest law, and I've been studying law for almost 6 years, and even the people in power will tell you that natural law is the highest. That's where our rights come from. They don't come from the Constitution. The Constitution is just a piece of paper. There's got to be a higher power that your rights come from. Now, the powers that was in control in 1868, they said, we do not want these black people having the same rights as us. Because back then, you know, they considered blacks 1/3 human. So that was in a Supreme Court ruling. I don't know the case off the top of my head. But so they produced this thing called a United States citizen that never really existed in law. Now, the legal principle behind that in natural law is if you have this idea for a widget and you decide to create said widget, that is your property. Now, apply that to the 14th Amendment. If the legislator, which is Congress, has the authority to create law. Now, I know there is a constitutional way to put amendments in, okay? The legislature proposes an amendment, which means they created it. Then it has to be voted on and ratified by, I think it's 2/3 of the states, without me looking it up off the top of my head. Now, who was the creator of that legislation? That would be Congress, who has under Article 1 the power to regulate said citizen. Congress. So it created this legal fiction, and a legal fiction does not mean fake. It means something that is presumed as real. Now, the word presume or presumption is how everything operates. They presume something. In other words, until there is evidence to support something else, it is presumed to be fact. In other words, layman's terms would be, this is what I think. I could be wrong. This is all the evidence. Okay. So it only applied. I got a 2004 Law Review Journal that says this, that it only applied to former slaves. Now, some of y'all are probably thinking, this don't make no sense. We're U.S. citizens.
No, and most people like me didn't really understand all this until I started talking with you about it. So, and Brian, am I a citizen?
Unfortunately, yeah, because almost everybody, and I say almost because not everybody is a citizen of the United States, because what happened is in 1933, America was declared bankrupt. See, what people don't know is there's three different United States. You've got two versions of the United States of America, and then you've got the United States. The United States, in law, is a federal corporation. Okay, it is a business in every sense of the word. What is one of the most powerful parts of the Constitution for the federal government? The Commerce Clause. That is the number one thing the federal government regulates. So before the 14th Amendment, when you would say, I am a United States citizen, it was a birthright. Okay? In other words, it was because you were born here. The 14th Amendment changed that. It made the United States citizen derivative. It made it the most important citizenship, not as a birthright, okay, not to protect your rights, but to make you part of the corporation, okay? In 1933, America was declared bankrupt. So they, under the New Deal, they passed all these laws like the Social Security Act, which they told us it was to receive a benefit that you've worked all your life. So you should have this retirement so you don't have to worry about anything. No. The minute you've got somebody else giving you something, you are a slave. And so we've got all these contracts, and Bill, you're smarter than you give yourself credit. You understand contracts.
Okay.
I know you say I'm real smart. I'm just a regular guy. I've just done a lot of reading. And I have a lot of respect for you because you're pretty smart, just in different areas. But everything revolves around the contract. Okay. Next time you go fill out a government document, remember when you signed up for the military and it told you that you are now property of the federal government? You became a United States citizen because you went into the military, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, because of the driver's license, because of the Social Security card, because of every government document you've ever filled out for a job, they ask you this all-important question. Are you a United States citizen? It does not mean that I'm from here, my ancestors are from here, God bless the USA. That is not what that means. You are saying you are a federal citizen under the law.
So I think what you're saying, Brian, is all those documents are just pieces of paper or plastic that identify who we are. They don't really give us rights. And just like you're saying, the Constitution is really just a piece of paper that tells us what our rights are, but that's not what gives us our rights. Our rights still come from our Creator. They're unalienable.
Yes, unalienable. Now, there's a couple of court cases I have found where you read my article. I named some of them in there. Jones v. Timmer. Yes, some people will say, oh, but that case was overturned. It don't matter. No. The principle laid out on the 14th Amendment citizen and the state citizen does matter because there's been many other cases where that principle is still there. See, Jones v. Timmer was a cab driver that sued under the 14th Amendment, Title 42, Section 1983 of the U.S. Code, and he claimed civil rights violations. Well, he claimed portions of the Bill of Rights. And two parts of this case, they talked about how the legislature never incorporated the Bill of Rights into the 14th Amendment, so you don't have access to those. That is only reserved for the state citizens. That's why I argue with some people and a lot of people out there that are conservatives and say I have a Second Amendment right. No, you don't if you're a U.S. citizen. Under the law, legally speaking, the only thing that stops the government from doing it is it would be riots. It would cause civil war. But legally speaking, a United States citizen has no rights. See, you got to think a right is something you cannot license. In law, a license, in Black's Law Dictionary, you can look it up. A license is a permission to do something that would otherwise be illegal. And I asked people, I said, tell me at what point a right to travel became illegal. At what point did marriage become illegal? At what point did owning a business become illegal? When did owning a gun become illegal? That you gotta have. This is just 4 examples. At what point did it become illegal that you had to have a license to do all this?
That's an excellent point. I had never thought about that before.
Well, got a lot in the media. You've heard this term sovereign citizen.
Yes.
Every time I hear someone in government or the public use the term sovereign citizen, I say they're an idiot. They're either ignorant to the law or they're pushing an agenda. One of the two. Because here's why. In law, there is no such thing as sovereign citizen. You are either sovereign or you're a citizen. You cannot be both. Chisholm versus Georgia is the earliest case I know of. There's others. Chisholm versus Georgia states that sovereignty resides in the people. They've trained us in over 200 years. Think of Esau and Jacob. Did not Esau give up his birthright for a bowl of porridge?
Mm-hmm.
What have they done to us? They've tricked us into giving up our birthright for the proverbial bowl of porridge that the government will keep us safe. We just have to have license to do everything.
So what you're saying is that if we need a license to do something, that we never really had a legal right to do that before. So isn't that sort of a dichotomy? And I don't think people understand all this.
It is. Now, and people may be sitting back scratching their heads saying, wait a minute. I had such and such case and the court protected my rights. They do let some people keep their rights because they cannot completely expose the system, but most of those people have paid a lot of money to attorneys. When you are, see, in this whole thing that I've been pursuing, I've been looking at what they say. It doesn't matter what I believe, not at all. It matters what does the establishment believe. The establishment is full of judges, lawyers. Hey, look, most everybody in Congress, most everybody that's been a president for a long time, most everybody that's been a governor, every governmental office across this country has been what? Attorneys.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to think the way they think. These judges are members of the bar, okay? They lie to us. Now, how do they control the people? Go back in history. What could a slave do? a slave could limited rights to contract, right? Very limited rights. They had very limited rights to be able to speak for themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
They had limited rights to owning property, right? Technically, they didn't have those rights. It was only by privileges. It was a permission. That's why the 14th Amendment has a section called Privileges and Immunities Clause. Okay? Privileges can be taken at any time. But now, those three examples I give, limited rights. You go up in the court, why do you think they want you to have an attorney? You don't have a right to speak, because if you have that right to speak, then that person in the black robe has to take your understanding of the law into consideration, not someone else's. So what you do by default is you tell people that you are an imbecile and don't know right from wrong, that you don't know the law, that you need this attorney to speak for you. Okay? Please acquiesce your rights.
Okay. I think I got that. Okay. Now, let me change the subject a little bit. This is something you've talked to me about, and you mentioned the three different United States, two United States of America and one United States. But in 1871, something happened that probably only 1% of the population knows anything about or understands about, and that is in 1871. Congress passed a law to make the United States a corporation. So how does that work?
What if I told you I recently discovered that right there was only a half truth?
It was only a what?
What if I told you that was a half truth?
Okay. So is this something like a legal fiction, or does it have anything to do with our rights to own things, own property, or does the government own everything? Does the government own us?
Now, technically, yes. Now, in 1779, there was a case that I discovered 2 months ago called Res Publica versus Swears. In that case, it was talking about the United States being a corporation. Now, this is in 1779, almost 100 years before 1871.
And 10 years before the Constitution was ratified.
Yeah, 1871. I mean, in 1779, the court said that the United States, as far as they knew, had been a body politic long before 1779. Okay? They didn't say for how long. Now, why is that important? I went to body politic in Black's Law Dictionary. It said C, corporation. So it tells you a body politic is a corporation. Now, in 1871, the District of Columbia Organic Act created a private trust. Do you know what a trust is?
Do I know it? I don't know if I could give you a good definition of one. I'll pass that back to you, Brian.
Well, I'm learning a lot lately about what a trust is. A trust is a type of business. Okay.
Okay.
So in 1871, they created basically a Sesque trust. Now, that means everything that's in the trust is owned by the trust. So in 1871, they create this trust. Now, You can go to online and look this up. Let's see here. See if I remember the correct title. I want to say it is titled, actually, let's do this because it's in my email. So let me grab my email.
Okay.
There is an actual code that you can go on to Google and you can look up the U.S. code yourself. 3002. I'll tell you the exact site here in a second.
While Brian's doing that, I suppose you guys think I should do a song and dance or something like that, but I don't have any talents in that area either. So
No.
let's be patient. Brian will have it for us in a second.
See, in U.S. code, there's a great document online. It's called the Federal Zone. Okay? In the Federal Zone, it will explain with citations and codes which United States is which. Okay? Now, depending on which one you are trying to go into, it's Title 28 USC 3002, paragraph 15A says the United States is a federal corporation. Okay? It is, you've got, I don't know the exact 3 different ones. 2 of them, you got the federal corporation. I just told you where to find that one. The other one is the 50 states working in union, which would be the republic. To understand this system, you got to understand there is 2 parallel systems working at the same time. Depending on which one you're in, will depend on if you're in the corporation or you're in the republic, because the corporation is on top. Another great document you can find is the republic, the house no one lives in. And everybody's probably sitting there thinking, wait a minute, the United States. Well, the average person does not understand that states are countries. We have 50 countries that agreed to work in unison and create a federal government. If you go look it up, each state was supposed to be foreign to the federal government.
Yes.
There was a case I found recently that I heard about, Briggs versus the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The man in that case, he fell in love with a slave and they had a child. He was in Pennsylvania, she was in Maryland. So he took her to Pennsylvania to be his wife. It went to federal court. The federal court said, it's no big thing. Now I'm paraphrasing without looking it up. It says that the regulations dealing with slaves in foreign jurisdictions is just mere municipal code. Now, what do we hear all the time? Traffic. So that's municipal code. They don't stop using these principles over time. They just quit using certain words. The definitions will still be there. They may change the words. See, a slave, I told you earlier, the slave, they quit using it. What do they call it now? A United States citizen, a person, an individual, a defendant, a respondent, a plaintiff. I can go on and on and on. These are all defined in law as legal fictions. Even the Bible has it. I'd have to go look it up, but it says him and his person. So even the Bible recognizes you have this two sides of you. So all they did is implement that in the law. And it's all based upon your willingness to contract.
Brian, originally when our founding fathers wrote the Constitution and created these United States of America, wasn't it we the people were really these I don't know the right words, but we were the ones who were the governing part. It was we the people. And we created the states, and then these states that you call federal or separate foreign countries, which they are, created the federal government. But then in 1871, I guess what happened was everything got turned upside down, and the federal government became the corporation, and the states, in a sense, became like regional departments of the federal government. And then there's we the people got pushed down to the bottom, and I'm not sure, if everybody understands, and I think hopefully they're getting a better feel for it today, is just exactly who we are and what we are.
Well, in 1871, yes, you're right. It was started in 1871. It did not get finished until between the 1930s and 1950s. If you go read the Constitution, you got three different courts. You got Article 1 courts, Article 2, and Article 3. Okay. Article 2 is your military courts governed by the UCMJ. Okay. Mm-hmm. So the only courts we're supposed to have to worry about is Article 3 and Article 1. The problem is there will not ever get a United States citizen or that 14th ever get to an Article 3 court. It's all Article 1. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 9 said that Congress had the authority to create inferior tribunals. They're all legislative courts. This is all an admiralty court system. And they would say, well, but admiralty, that's law of the sea. Now, there are some people that I run with that study law. I will tell you this. Admiralty is a law of contract. Maritime is a law of sea. Admiralty can also be the law of sea because the contracts go over land and sea. Okay. Congress created this admiralty court system. It's all based around contracts. Okay. Go back to the Declaration of Independence where it says the consent of the governed. That consent is key. They need our consent to be able to do what they're doing. I had an attorney, a fairly good attorney, that was dealing with stuff in our case. And I've argued jurisdiction this whole case. And he said, well, I've looked at jurisdiction this entire case. I mean, looked at every possible angle of jurisdiction. And he said, the only reason they got jurisdiction is because you consented. You went. I said, wait a minute here. And I've had two attorneys tell me that. And I told the last attorney, I said, wait a minute. If I was to take this before any jury in this country, I said, would they consider it consensual or under threat, coercion, or duress? Because when it comes to what y'all are doing, it's not consensual. it's by force. He didn't like that. The government is force. And until we, the people, start realizing what's been done to us and our children and the truth behind it, things are not going to change. The conservatives out there really do support Trump. Trump can't fix this. This system has been built over 200 years. Do you think in 8 years you are going to reverse it?
No, and that's a good point. And most people get too tied up in all the minutia of everything. Right now, we're worried about Stormy Daniels and Michael Cohen, and we're worried about global warming or climate change, and we're worried about all these things that really don't have are really meaningless. All they are is just attempts at trying to make globalize America, which is another thing I guess we could talk for hours on as well.
Yes, I mean, one thing I've learned. You remember? Look, let's go into this whole thing with the bankruptcy of the United States.
Okay.
Because eventually my article is going to get into that. In 1929, we had the Great Depression, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got House Joint Resolution 190. It wasn't House Joint Resolution. I keep having to correct myself. It was Joint Resolution 192. The Act of March 9th, 1933, and the Act of March 20th, 1933. There was a bunch of them passed back then, right? Where they took us off the gold standard.
Mm-hmm.
The reason why they won't let us audit, in my opinion, the reason they won't let us audit Fort Knox is probably because it is empty. They took us off the gold standard because the bankers were already taken over. The big banks that own the Federal Reserve had already collapsed the economy. They created a run on the banks, which caused the Great Depression. So what do we get? We got FDR comes in and says, oh, for us, this banking emergency that they authorized the government, the president under his war powers to basically become a Caesar. And that national emergency has never stopped. Look at every president since then. Every year, there is a national emergency, which keeps those 470 federal codes enforced for the president to operate under their military jurisdiction, under his war powers as commander-in-chief in this country. We have been under martial law, and yes, people will say, no, I get to do whatever I want. Yes, you do. But tell me what rights you truly have. Tell me what you own. You don't own your house. Quit paying your taxes. What if I told you your house you never owed a freaking cotton-red cent onto it, that the government had mortgaged everything off? You remember the banking bailout after the 2008 housing collapse?
Yeah.
The banking bailout, they got up on TV and said, oh, we had too big to fail. It made a bunch of Americans mad, right? The one thing I learned about that, the banking bailout was a fraud. Under U.S. code, every single mortgage in the country is insured by, by the federal government. Now, a lot of y'all, when y'all hear this, you're going to know if you've ever signed papers on a mortgage, you're going to remember some of this. There was 3 main documents you had to sign. One was a power of attorney, giving the banks power of attorney over your property if you fail to pay.
Mm-hmm.
Then you had a warranty deed. You had the warranty deed. And then you also had a promissory note. You never got paid a dime on that note. That promissory note was your what's called a negotiable instrument, because go back to the Securities and Exchange Act in the 30s and the Social Security Act and all these different acts that they passed. They cannot demand payment in any form. I can show you the congressional records and the policies of the federal government that says this. So you gave them a promissory note as payment for the house. They told you you owe this much a month. What they didn't tell you is, no, you don't. In law, you were considered a third-party investor, and you should have received dividends. But since you left them the promissory note, they filed, I think it's called a 1043A with the IRS claiming abandoned property. They sold the promissory note as abandoned property out the back door like 3 times. They put all of that into private trust. You remember hearing in derivatives, mortgage-backed securities?
Mm-hmm.
Those mortgage-backed securities may contain 10, 20, 30, I don't know how many, mortgages in them.
Mm-hmm.
So when the 2008 housing collapse happened, caused by the bankers, all they did is file the paperwork with the government claiming the insurance. Well, now the government has to pay the insurance, and oh my God, let's call it a banking bailout. It's all fraud. Because they know we, the people, don't even know who we are in law. They don't even know anything about the system. They care more about the football game and the soap operas and the sitcoms and what's happening on American Idol than they do about how the system operates.
And that's by design as well, because our education system has taught us not how to think, but it's actually indoctrinated us. So the government indoctrination centers are what we now have as schools, which should teach us how to think. And unfortunately, too few of us are able to do that.
Very true. Look, when you got a federal government that controls the education, you got a federal government that controls the medical system, you got a federal government that controls every one of the states. People say, no, the states are sovereign. Really? There was a book published in 1957. It's called The Jurisdiction of the Federal Government within the state territories. What you have operating inside our states, because most everybody is a U.S. citizen, is federal territories. Now, in U.S. code, the proper domicile of a U.S. citizen is the 10-mile squares that we call Washington, D.C. If you are outside of the District of Columbia, the Commerce Clause kicks in. So because there are so many United States citizens roaming around in all the states, go figure, the federal government says, hey, you got to take care of our citizens. If you want to keep getting this money, you got to pass these laws. There is over 50 different types of uniform types of codes. You've got the Uniform Commercial Code, the Uniform Child Custody Jurisdiction Enforcement Act, Uniform Trust Code, the FMCSA, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, that passes that states have to go along with. And if the federal government says, hey, if you don't do this, we won't give you federal funds, who's in control? It ain't the states, and it ain't us.
It's the federal government. And I think we could even go back to 1913 with the 16th Amendment, which took the the state representatives, which were the senators, and caused them to be voted on by popular vote popularity contest, so to say. And so now the senators are they're federal instead of being represented through the states.
That is correct. They got rid of that. Everything after the first 10 amendments of the Constitution is all federal. If you go back and you read the Constitution, on the 7th Amendment, it talks about suits between people of different states. I think it's the Article 3. It talks about suits between different citizens of different states, suits between the states and the citizens and the states, and it gives us all this great breakdown, right? Under the Bill of Rights, you have access to sue the state. But how many times have you seen a federal case where they claim under the 11th Amendment the states are sovereign?
I've never seen that.
Yeah. Well, go look it up. There's all kinds of court cases out there. They claim sovereign immunity because a 14th Amendment citizen don't have access to sue the states, because since it is a legal fiction created by the federal government, guess what? The states are sovereign for that. Think about every time you've heard of anybody you know that's ever tried to sue the federal government. It says you have to, not sue the federal government, sue some corrupt official in state, and they take it to the federal government, and it comes back and says dismissed because you haven't exhausted all your administrative remedies. What is administrative? That's contract under admiralty. See what the similarities between the words? Mm-hmm. Go look at any federal indictment. Almost every single federal indictment out there is going to have one thing for jurisdiction. There's going to be other reasons for jurisdiction, but one key component for jurisdiction, that the federal government has jurisdiction. And it's going to claim interstate commerce. Now, if you have a local job in, say, Florida, and you've never, your entire life, left the state of Florida, yet you have a federal charge, and they claim interstate commerce. How is that?
Well, yeah, you're right. How does that work?
Because you've got all these contracts claiming to be a United States citizen, and you're outside your domiciled area called DC.
Okay, Brian. I think we're getting to a point where we're starting to run out of time, and I wanted to mention something about the Constitution. Is that what I've found, Brian, is no one really has ever read the Constitution or read all the amendments to the Constitution. There's 27. Most people don't even know there's 27. Of course, a couple of them don't count anymore because that was prohibition and that was repealed, so they're not in play anymore. And then the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments, I think you're getting me to the point where I'm kind of questioning them. But in my new book, 2020, A Clear Vision for Our Future, I've got the entire Constitution in there, and my characters discuss the Constitution, and I hope that I've got this right. I think I do, and I've done a lot of studying on it, but I still have to pass on to Brian, because he's my expert on this in this area.
I know that here's what you said is absolutely right. You're not the only one saying that. Some of the people that I follow, I don't follow them because I accept what they say as the gospel. Have they been right? Yes, they've been right, more than most. They've said the same thing. They said that to understand this system, you're going to have to study the Constitution. I mean, pick it up and read it. Go read what the decisions are, and it takes years. I've been doing this almost 6 years. Okay, until we understand see, I know I'm talking about slavery and how we've been enslaved, but the government cannot pass a single law that interferes with a man's rights. And you're sitting there saying, wait a minute, people that are watching this is going to say, wait a minute, but they've done and interfered with their rights all the time. No, they always have to give you a remedy. All these contracts, they give us a way to get out. Am I going to tell you I'm the expert? No, I'm learning. But I know there's people out there that have separated themselves from the system. The Bible in the book of Revelations talks about Babylon, and it says, come out of her, my people. This system that's in control, it goes back that far. They have not changed anything they're doing. They did it in Rome. They did it in Germany. It's the same system, and it's the same problem. Nothing new under the sun.
So if I can wrap this up then, Brian, I think what we've done is we've explained that our country is founded on and uses, it's a Constitution that we have, but the Constitution really is from the Bible. And a lot of people just don't want to acknowledge that, but that's where we get our rights from our Creator. That's all identified in the Bible, and that's the basis for our Constitution and our rights as people in the United States of America. And I guess now we have to start learning more about that. But I guess what we're going to do is we're going to leave everybody with a lot of questions, but then that's a good thing because we want you guys to start thinking.
Yep. Y'all can follow my website. It's called therightsofthefew.com. And I am a truck driver by trade. I study part-time. So it will not be an article a week. It'll take me 2 or 3 weeks to put up an article. If you go read the first article, you'll understand why, because it is in depth.
Okay, how can people get you, reach you? You also have a web page.
Yeah, that's therightsofthefew.com.
Okay, and we'll have that link to that in our article that this video is embedded in. And can people get in touch with you through email or through Facebook? I know you have a Facebook page. Do you want to let people know about that?
There's always ways to get in touch with me.
Okay. Okay, then tell us the name of your Facebook page, because it has something to do with the Roman name Libertas, and we all know that has.
I have a Google Plus account, and it's called The Rights of the Few. Twitter is The Rights of the Few. So you'll be able to find it.
Okay.
You can go to my Facebook. There's always ways to contact me.
Okay. And if you can't find Brian directly, you can find him through me, because we try to stay in touch with each other. Sometimes we go for periods of times where we don't, but we've got a lasting, lifelong friendship. There's no question about that. So let me wrap this up by saying, Brian, God bless you for being on. Thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge and with us. And God bless everybody that's watching, and our troops are deployed, our vets, and everybody that we can think of. God bless you all. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next time. Okay, boys and girls, some of you are going to get the commercial at the end of the show, and I want to thank Brian Robertson for being on the show with me. I truly enjoy having him and talking with him every time I do, and I hope the audio and video were of good quality. I know it's difficult sometimes when we're both in 2 different locations and all that, but in any case, read Brian's articles are really great articles. He explains everything so well. This is all information we need to know and we need to learn about. And what Brian's doing is he's really giving you a course in the law and what America is all about without you really going into some real heavy, deep, hard to read lawyer legalese or whatever you want to call it. You know me, I'm just trying to get by. So anyway, speaking of getting by, how about getting a book? And tell people to get my book. And hey, if you already bought the book, you can also order books and I'll sign them and I'll send them out to your friends and relatives and let them read the book. It makes a great gift. Hey, it's only $20 and I don't charge you. I pay the taxes myself because I won't make people pay taxes. That's what the government does. I don't do that. And I even mail them free, you know, so you're really getting a big discount on the book. And it's priceless. And you can put it in your bookshelf. You can refer to it. You can put it on the table. You can say, hey, I know that guy, you know, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, goodbye, boys and girls. And remember, where there is no vision, the people perish. That's Proverbs 29:18. And where the American people have no vision, the American people will perish. And I think we gave you some food for thought on that today. And remember, be good, boys and girls, and God bless America, and God save our America, because we need you now more than ever before.